Do you ever feel guilty of going about things backward? I presume this is the situation many of us Christians face every Trinity Sunday. Though our sacred authors describe and comment on God from one direction, we're usually approaching Him from the opposite direction. While our writers create the biblical pictures they develop based on their personal experiences of that God, many of us shape our personal God experiences just to fit into our pictures. Our definition of God is frequently more important than our experiences of God. First, we look for theology and then search for experiences to reinforce it. Our sacred authors weren't brought up on catechisms. They were formed by experiences. Though they later attempt to put their experiences into some form of logical patterns, it's clear from the many, often contradictory biblical theologies we encounter that no one size fits all. Those willing to be involved with God are committing themselves to an adventure almost impossible to describe. Perhaps that's why, in God's wisdom, our scriptures were composed by Semitic, not Greek thinkers, people who refuse to analyze their exploits. Instead of coming up with either-or ways of looking at their God adventures, they concentrate on synthesizing them. They're always on the lookout to add another dimension or surface an aspect they never before noticed. Their one goal is to zero in on the both and of their experiences. Not long ago, I learned of an interesting custom among the 19th century North American Plains Indians, counting coup. That's C-O-U-P, counting coup. In battle, the tribe's most courageous warriors would simply touch an enemy, not kill or wound him, and then ride off. After the conflict, the survivors would gather to count the touches and compare notes. Among other things, they were convinced such coups transferred some of their enemy's strength or spirit to them in ways that killing them couldn't achieve. Could saving and collecting our sacred writings be another way of counting coup? In a sense, our biblical writers have touched God and lived to tell us about it. They could have killed God by giving us a technical catechism definition of divinity, but instead they only touched Him, leaving something for another day and another encounter. Best of all, they shared the spirit they gained from their contact, helping us uncover another dimension of someone who boasts unlimited dimensions. Unlike our Semitic thinking sacred authors, we Greek thinkers are in the business of killing, not touching. When we get done with the subject we attack, there's nothing left but to bury the carcass in some theological manual. Thankfully, today's three sacred writers touch and don't kill. The author of Proverbs could never have buried his or her coup in one of those manuals. It's simply too poetic. The writer actually co-creates with Yahweh, standing next to God during the creation process. Paul and John, on the other hand, bring up things on which many of us rarely reflect. The apostle zeroes in on the failures and weaknesses that come to the fore when we reach out to God in our lives. Yet the instant we put our hands on the divine in our midst, we see the limits of those hands. In the same way, the evangelist takes us beyond what we cannot bear to hear now. We can never look forward to retiring from the battle, no matter how often we engage with God. It's an essential part of who we are. No matter how we've learned about God in the past, there's always time to rearrange our priorities. It might take a lot more courage, but what an experience we'll have to boast about. We'll not only leave God intact, but have a strength we've never had before. Maybe those Indians knew what they were doing.